We have a lot to cover in today's video, including some trade rumors focusing on players like Rasmus Ristolainen, Jack Eichel, and Sam Reinhart of the Buffalo Sabres, Shane Gostisbehere, Vince Dunn, and even Patrik Laine of the Blue Jackets as well. We also have news on the Boston Bruins maybe bringing back a couple of veteran forwards, some coaching updates, and some signings. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned and you heard off the top here, we have a lot to cover, so let's just dive right in and get started. We do have some signings to discuss here today. The Chicago Blackhawks have signed an undrafted player out of the Czech Republic. That's 22-year-old winger Jakub Por, who's a 6'3", 210-pound winger. Like I said, out of the Czech Republic. He's never been drafted by the NHL, so obviously the Hawks are reaching out to Europe again to see if they can find themselves another solid player. They've done this in the past, and they found a few gems, so we will see how this works out on a one-year deal here for the Blackhawks and this Czech Republic winger. Now, we also have news that the Ottawa Senators have signed another prospect goaltender. This one's from the 2020 draft, who they drafted in the third round. And that's Finnish goaltender Leevi Meriläinen. So, obviously, the Sens have a lot of prospect goaltenders under contract here right now. I would assume he'll likely continue to play in Finland for a little while, but we'll see. The Sens are certainly stocked in the cupboards when it comes to goaltending prospects at this point here. And the New Jersey Devils have also announced a re-signing today. Forward Nathan Bastian has signed a 2-year contract valued at $825,000 as an average annual value. Of course, he got into 40-some games for the Devils this past year and kind of started to establish himself. So he would have been a restricted free agent, and he's already inked his 2-year contract to remain with the organization here. Now, here are some coaching updates as well. We had some updates on that today. Former Calgary Flames bench boss Jeff Ward is back in the NHL coaching circles, joining the Dallas Eakins and the Anaheim Ducks as part of his staff as an assistant coach. So obviously Ward will continue on there. And we also got word that it looks like Rick Tocchet is emerging as the most likely candidate for the Seattle Kraken head coaching job. Not a given. I can't confirm that as of yet. But as of right now, that's how things are looking. We know they were very interested in Gerard Gallant, who has since signed on with the New York Rangers. So he's off the market. The other piece of this as well is Rod Brind'Amour with the Hurricanes. I mean, there's a connection there with Brind'Amour and Ron Francis of the Kraken being longtime teammates and friends, that obviously the Kraken would be very interested in Brind'Amour. If he were to leave Carolina, he's yet to re-sign or at least make anything official at this point. There's a lot of uncertainty over that, but I know today in Elliot Friedman's latest 31 Thoughts blog and podcast, it does sound like things are leaning towards him staying, that there's a verbal agreement in place, and that they're waiting on contracts and everything to be sorted out with the rest of the supporting staff, including his other assistant coaches and the equipment trainers and everybody else that works with the Canes there behind the scenes. So we'll have to see how things go, but a situation worth monitoring. But it looks as though, from what I've seen and heard around the NHL circles, that Tocchet is the leading contender at this point, and the Kraken may not want to wait too much longer before making a final decision here. One other quick word as well when it comes to signings. We have word that Columbus Blue Jackets forward Mikhail Grigorenko is in fact leaving the NHL and heading back to play in the Continental Hockey League in Russia. Grigorenko's time in the NHL has come to a close there, so he signs elsewhere. And then we also have some news out of the Boston Bruins organization based on their end of season media availability. And of course, this isn't really like official news. Nobody's been signed, but based on comments from Don Sweeney, Cam Neely and company, it sounds like there's a lot of interest to bring back Taylor Hall and David Krejci both. I know Taylor Hall's already gone public in his interviews saying that he really loved it in Boston and would really like to find a way to make it fit and work out to stay in Boston. Many believe that he was very interested in signing with the Bruins last offseason before he went to Buffalo, but obviously the Sabres were offering a substantial amount more on the 1-year contract, so he ended up going there but found his way to Boston anyway. There were a few other teams in the mix, but many believe that the Bruins were one of the leading spots that he preferred to go to all along, and that he obviously really enjoyed his time there. We've seen him play better with the Bruins than he has with the Coyotes or the Devils in recent years, so I think it's fair to say that his time there sort of rejuvenated him and got him going. I know many were kind of somewhat disappointed with his second round play, but he started the first round well and certainly played well towards the end of the regular season too. So we'll see, but it sounds like there's a real good chance he comes back. Personally, I'm going to say a 3 or 4 year contract around $5 million is likely what he ends up taking. David Krejci, they mentioned that essentially they're going to give him some time to think things over and see what he wants to do. But essentially, based on what they said and what Krejci said, it sounds like Krejci has no intention of playing anywhere else. The same sort of thing that Tuukka Rask said. It's either he signs in Boston or he's not playing in the NHL. I mean, many feel it's only fair that Krejci have a chance to finish out his career with the Bruins after having a real solid run with them. I'm going to say he probably takes less money because he was their highest paid player at over $7 million. Knocked that down to maybe, $4 to $5 million and signed for, maybe a 2-year deal, something to that effect. To me, that would make a lot of sense. There's really nobody there in Boston ready to take his spot as that number 2 center behind Patrice Bergeron. So what do you do? I mean, if you don't sign Krejci, you're going to have to find a way to make a trade or go into free agency anyway. So why not stick with the combo that worked so well? Those two players worked well together and found some chemistry, so you might as well stick with it. Now, who plays the wing on the other side of that line is still up for debate, and there's still a good chance that Jake DeBrusk gets moved this offseason as well. I think that time has come to a close, but we'll see. But speaking of DeBrusk, Neely was asked in his media availability about the 2015 NHL draft and kind of what could have been. They had 3 consecutive first-round picks in the middle of that first round. After selling off some assets, they picked up some additional first-round picks from other teams, and it just worked out based on the order that they had 3 in a row, right in the middle there. And obviously the Boston Bruins ended up drafting, first they took Jacob Zboril, then they took Jake DeBrusk, and then they took Zach Senyshyn. And the only one that's really worked out to be a regular player so far is DeBrusk. And DeBrusk has had his fair share of inconsistencies and ups and downs over his time in Boston here. So if you look at that draft roster, there's some interesting names that they did not take, and you have to wonder what could have been. I mean, right after those 3 players, the next 3 or 4 picks were Thomas Chabot, Matthew Barzal, Kyle Connor, and then a few picks after that was Brock Besser. I mean, some big names there that could make a huge difference on this Boston Bruins team if they would have made those selections a little bit differently. I mean, and Neely said that he thinks about that draft a lot, and that maybe getting Don Sweeney into his role sooner, because they obviously made a change in GM that year from going from Chiarelli to Sweeney. If they would have done things a little bit sooner, that maybe they could have had more time to prep better for that draft. But I don't really think that's a valid excuse, because really, your amateur scouting is going to be a big role in that, as well as the amateur scouts that work under him. And if they were scouting Jacob Zboril, they would have been scouting Thomas Chabot. They played together on the St. John Sea Dogs. In fact, they even played a fair bit together as partners at times. I saw them both play a lot with the Sea Dogs in their run there. Since the Sea Dogs are so close to me, I watched them quite a bit throughout the season here. So, how could they think that Jacob Zboril was going to be better than Thomas Chabot when Chabot's offensive output was more than double what Zboril's was? And just the skating and the whole ability that he brings is just a big difference between the two. Watching them play, even at that level, you could see that Chabot was going to be by far the more much higher ceiling player. But then on top of that, you got Matthew Barzal and Kyle Connor. One of those guys in that lineup would be awesome right now. You need a young center like Barzal who could be taking over for Bergeron and Krejci as they get older and their roles change. And Connor could be in a real effective scoring winger. Like, they really messed up those 3 picks, and that could be a big defining moment in whether or not the Bruins get any additional Stanley Cups in the next number of years. It was really a major opportunity that was wasted. But I mean, it's not the only one. You can't, sit here and dwell on it, because there's numerous draft blunders that you see all the time. Not all players project the same way. Some guys are later bloomers, and some of it you just have to scratch your head on the scouting and wonder how things could have been missed. But it is what it is. It's too late now, and I'm sure Neely has regrets over how things were handled there. But just interesting looking back and saying how much of a different team this team would be today had they made some better choices at that draft table. Now, before we jump any further in today's trade rumors, I want to take a minute and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers, where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that promotional video. I greatly appreciate it. Jumping into the rest of today's rumors, we have word from Elliotte Friedman today that it looks as though the New Jersey Devils are coming out as a potential landing spot for defenseman Rasmus Ristolainen of the Buffalo Sabres. It makes sense that Risto would be of interest to them. They could certainly use a right-shot defenseman. He's got a fair bit of experience now, and he only has 1 year left on his contract at $5.4 million, so they have flexibility. If they can make the acquisition, try it out for a year, see how things go, and if he seems to be a really good fit there, they can work out a contract extension. And if not, he can hit free agency. But I'm not sure what the price tag would be on Ristolainen. And I'm sure there are other teams out there showing interest as well. But, obviously we have word that the Devils are a front runner. Now, he also mentions that with a little bit less certainty that the Devils also might be in on Shane Gostisbehere of the Philadelphia Flyers. We know that they've been looking to unload that Gostisbehere contract for a substantial period of time now, well over a year, if not a year and a half, since he hasn't really had the best couple of seasons here. And obviously, if they're willing to throw in the right additional piece to be like a sweetener, I think sounds like the Devils would be willing to take that contract on from what Friedman was saying. So I don't know if they have to throw in a decent draft pick, a prospect. Obviously, the Devils are a team that are rebuilding and will take any additional younger assets or draft picks they can get their hands on. So if they can kind of weaponize their cap space and get a couple of veteran defensemen like Ristolainen and Gostisbehere that help them for the next little while short term, while at the same time getting some additional assets along with that, then that would only make sense as well. So don't be surprised if you see the New Jersey Devils make some deals along those lines here. And we also got word, no big surprise again, but just confirming that Vince Dunn is very much being shot by the St. Louis Blues. The Blues have his name out there and are having a substantial amount of trade conversations that involve this young defenseman. So it's just a matter of time likely before he goes. Of course, he's a restricted free agent, needs a new contract. Would be a potential player that the Kraken could be of interest to if he makes it onto the Blues rosters here by the expansion draft as well. So they know that they're at risk to lose the player anyway. He'd be one of the more interesting guys that Seattle probably would want if he's there. That's why he's likely going to be traded in order to kind of avoid that and get something more in return rather than lose him for expansion. But his name is very much out there, just a matter of where he ends up. Now, Friedman also goes on to talk today about the Buffalo Sabres and Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart and kind of updating things here. Now, based on what we're hearing now, it looks like the Sabres are expecting between one or both of these players to potentially be getting some pretty high draft picks, likely in the top 10 of this 2021 NHL draft. We know the Sabres are already picking first overall, and they might make trades here to end up picking multiple times in the top 10, which seems quite likely based on what Friedman's talking about. So clearly that shows us some of the teams that could be expressing interest in either of these players. We know one of those top picks that could be up for grabs would be like the Anaheim Ducks. That would not be surprising. I could see them having interest in both players. There's also some other teams up there like Chicago to an extent. I could see them maybe being more interested in Reinhart more so than Eichel. You never know, but given where things are at with the Hawks, that might be tricky to do with having Jonathan Toews and Patrik Laine also making over $10 million, but I guess it kind of makes sense for the future. If Jonathan Toews is a player that battled an illness and sat out the entire year, maybe your centerpieces down the road for the future are Eichel and Kirby Dach. I mean, that's a pretty good mix down the middle, so I wouldn't completely rule that out. You also have a team like the Red Wings who are rebuilding, could very much benefit by adding a star center, although I think that's very, very less likely, given that the Red Wings, I think, are so far away from really being relevant that I'm not sure that they would jump the gun here just yet. To me, that's something you do when you think you're a lot closer to getting back to being a playoff contender. So certainly some interesting names to watch there with the Sabres, and some of the teams near the top of the draft are likely having conversations with Buffalo around those top two players. And lastly here, there is a possibility we could see Patrik Laine on the move yet again. Now, of course, Elliotte Friedman goes on to talk about this in his blog today, referring to the possibility of maybe the Florida Panthers being a landing spot for the Finnish winger. Now, a couple of reasons here I think he goes down this road. As I've talked about here in the last little bit, since they've hired Brad Larson as their head coach, I personally think it's quite likely that the Blue Jackets are going down the road of a rebuild. I think they would have went with a more experienced coach if they really thought they could make a couple of trades and get themselves back in contention. I'm not sure we're going to see that happen here. I think they're going to go in a different direction. Now, they may prove me wrong, but we know that Seth Jones is on the market and is a player that's likely getting dealt by the draft, given the fact that he's advised them he's not re-signing, at least not anytime soon. So they're not going to want to take the chance to lose yet another top player for nothing. Makes sense to trade Jones. And Laine is one of those guys as well. Is going to be needing a new deal within the next year. And does it make sense to pay him big money if the team's going to be going through a rebuild? The reason that Friedman mentions the Panthers is the connection to Barkov. I mean, he and Barkov are great friends. They played together before at international tournaments. And clearly those two would make a dynamic duo. Now, the Florida Panthers are going to be in a similar situation with Barkov here, that he needs a new contract in the relatively near future. And they could get these guys locked up to be a big piece of their future for an extended period of time. Now, of course, no guarantee that happens, but it makes sense here that Columbus might consider moving more than just Seth Jones if they're really going to be rebuilding. I mean, Jones isn't the only guy on the team that's been linked to some trade talk. They're expected to trade a goaltender as well. And to me, like, you have to look at some other pieces there and say, you know what, considering that their prospect pool is relatively weak and not very deep here, maybe it's time they take the plunge and rebuild, and maybe if they can make some trades here, maybe they get some of these high picks as well in the draft, and some of those teams are really interested in a guy like Jones, for example. So clearly there's work to be done, and if Laine is moved, I would think it makes a lot of sense that the Panthers could very well be a good landing spot for him. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.